this is my NEC EWS 4800/430 UNIX workstation. Hands down the most exotic machine I currently have. Looks like a PC. It is MIPS based. I believe it's an R4000 processor. This machine has 64 megs of RAM. Some improvements and repairs I've done is I've recapped it. Both the power supply and the main board wasn't too bad. Installed a Zulu SCSI to replace the original mechanical hard drive, and then also two chips, the RTC, the Dallas 12887, and then the SRAM chip, which I guess is, I do a lot of stuff with vintage Suns, so kind of like the NVRAM. And I'll put some links, and I'll have some more pictures later, but I'll put some links to what I used. Basically for the RTC, Necroware, I believe, is what I ordered and put in there, and you just put a watch battery in it. And then for the SRAM, there's a project, I think his name is Marco Reps, and on PCBWay, there's a shared project where you can order the SRAM adapter and then use an EEPROM programmer. So that's one of the other things I did initially was dump the EEPROM, which is also a Dallas chip, but I dumped the image, then I got the SRAM adapter and rewrote it, and knock on wood, it seems to be working just fine. So shouldn't have any issues with batteries dying. Everything's nice and backed up and replaced with modern replacements. So as you could see from the thumbnail of the video, here's the front of the machine. It's very, very PC-like. Maybe a little boring, but it's definitely not a PC inside. So we have power, SCSI, and network, three ingredients that make any successful Unix workstation. SCSI CD-ROM, floppy. The power switch is kind of interesting. It definitely has this mechanical kerchunk, so to speak, but it is momentary. It's a soft, I guess you'd call it a soft power on. Essentially, this is stateless, right? So it's momentary. So no matter what you do, when you plug this in, it will be off when you connect the power cable to the power supply in the rear, and hitting the switch will boot it up. And then also, when the machine is running, so when the OS is running, if you hit the switch, it will detect that and shut down gracefully. So that's actually a very, very nice feature. So let's take a look at the back. A lot more to talk about back here. Power supply, pretty standard PC-ish power supply. Let's just start over here. The dump button does work. I have hit that before when I was doing some troubleshooting and just out of curiosity. It has audio jacks, built-in twisted pair, NPC 12, no idea what this is. Parallel, external SCSI, two serial ports, AC link on-off, no idea what this is. Reset. The keyboard and mouse, you'll notice that the colors are backwards, and that's because this machine is very, very picky about keyboards. It is PS2, but I had a lot of trouble finding a keyboard that works. And I still really don't have the keyboard that I want. The one that I want, the one that's designed for this computer, is an NEC N9832-46. And I found one Japanese blog from probably 20 years ago that mentions it. And, there's tons of PC98 keyboards, which isn't PS2, by the way. But there's tons of other NEC keyboards, PC98, etc., that you can find. But this particular keyboard for this machine is proving to be extremely hard to find. So what I wanted to say here is you'll notice the colors are reversed, and that's because in troubleshooting, I didn't know, was there an actual problem, electrically, mechanically. So I actually desoldered and replaced the PS2 ports right here. And for whatever reason, NEC put keyboard on top, mouse on bottom, so the colors are out of whack. Originally, they were black ports. That didn't changing and reinstalling those ports didn't change the keyboard behavior. It's still really, really picky. PCI, as evidenced down here, if you can see this down here, and then there's also an EISA slot over here. But the PCI, the video card, as you can imagine, it's NEC, some sort of VGA. I don't think there's 3D acceleration. I don't really have a way to tell, but it's definitely not a run-of-the-mill, PC video card, but it's also not, over the top. I mean, it looks pretty standard. This here is a 3D printed bracket with the Zulu SCSI. Like most of my vintage machines that have SCSI, I have some sort of SCSI emulator. I lean towards Zulu SCSI. I just kind of know what I'm doing with those. I do have on my NEC station a blue SCSI. But yeah, generally SCSI emulator is what I try to do if it'll work for that machine. And one of the first things I did when I got this was take the physical hard drive and image it, just with DD, just raw image. So I pulled an image of that, backed it up, and then put that on the SD card for Zulu SCSI, and then I could play around with that. That way, if I blew something up, destroyed the OS, I could always revert to the backup. All right, so let's take a look inside. Off camera, I already removed the cover. There's just 7, I believe, screws. It comes off, again, very PC-like, desktop PC form factor. So one interesting thing is that the memory, there's this middle board that I'm touching here, and there's a stabilizing bracket, and then the memory modules go right here. This machine has 64, so there's 2 of them, so 32s. And it connects to the main board through physically PCI slots. I don't know that it is actual PCI electrically, but physically they're PCI slots. The video card, here we have the 3D printed mounting bracket for the Zulu SCSI, and I have an HDD clicker on here to give me some old school hard drive sounds and feedback. You've got the EISA slot over here, fans, brackets, CD-ROM. I don't know if it's showing up on camera, but the processor's down here. I have some pictures. I'll do kind of a mini slideshow because quite frankly, I'm a little lazy. I've already taken this apart multiple times to recap it and do other things. So really didn't want to take it apart yet again, but I do have some better pictures showing the CPU, the heatsink, some of the other chips, things like that. So here's the CPU and the heatsink fan. You can tell it takes up a lot of real estate, pretty big footprint. Here are the 2 Dallas chips. The one on the bottom is the RTC, the one on the top is the SRAM. Those are the originals. That's a replacement for the RTC. And that is the SRAM adapter. So here's the BIOS screen. That keyboard is not available. I do have a keyboard connected. But like I said, this machine seems very, very sensitive and picky about keyboards. So even though it works, it says not available. The other kind of interesting thing there on that BIOS screen was you get a temperature readout. So now we're into booting the kernel. This will take a bit. get some copyrights, and we could see we are in the era of Novell-owned UNIX and Streamware TCP/IP. That's interesting. I'll have to search that. You see it's starting the license server. The operating system on here, I'm running what came with it, and the license seems pretty critical to the machine, even continuing. I think I tried once to boot. I found an ISO, and I tried to boot and do an install, and the license tripped me up. All right, so we're into the desktop here. Let's take a look at system status. Not as much info as I thought there would be. You get some readouts of file systems and disks, and then for some reason in here you get time, backup and restore, a couple options. Don't know why CD-ROM's there. I don't know how it's going to back up to a CD-ROM. This is the same thing basically we saw in that drop down previously. Preferences, kind of the usual suspects. Color schemes here. Let's take a look at some of the built-in color schemes. Industrial Blight. I kind of like that one. I certainly like the name. And some of these, like that one a little bit. Definitely that one. The title bar text, you just can't see it because it's black. And I know I could change it, but I just wanted to see the built-in themes. Honestly, I like the default theme. The one we came in on kind of puts me in the mindset of CDE. Some other desktop appearance type knobs, the locale, English. That was fun. A little bit chicken and egg, because I don't read or speak Japanese. So getting it into English was a bit of a challenge initially, but I did manage to do it. And this is system admin kind of area. This is the network setup, network address. I think what they're trying to say there is the last octet, because if you hit full address there, you see the whole. So I'm guessing they assume you're on a /24. The actual interface. The network daemon status shows you what's configured for startup and what's not configured for startup. Then this extra admin, as you can see, you get a TUI actually for this. And it kind of, I feel like in the SCO world, there's interfaces like this. And, obviously another older UNIX, AIX, things like that. But, this really makes me think that they wanted to give people the power to get under the hood and make these changes, but at the same time, you don't have to be a command line wizard necessarily. They wanted to make it a little easier. And the whole operating system comes across to me that way. They really did try to make it user-friendly, which is a very relative term, but as user-friendly as possible to kind of bridge that gap between just pure command line jockey and the other end of the spectrum where you can't hardly change anything, and you get what you get. And you can see, I mean, you can use the keyboard here, but I'm using the mouse, so it's kind of that hybrid mouse-aware TUI kind of system. That basically looks like the output from the mount command, I would say. Diagnostics, I was kind of scared to really run anything in here, so I didn't. And as you could probably tell, I don't think I mentioned it, but I'm logged in as root. Well, yeah, you saw it on the login screen. So yeah, I'm logged in as root. That gives us access to, everything, obviously. But I did manage to add myself as a regular user, and I decided to do the video logging in as root because you do get to see more, you have access to more. As opposed to logging in as my regular user, it's very limited. But since I added that user, and that was a while ago, I have quite honestly forgotten how I did it. So these are user applications, I would say. This is interesting, this release memo. It's basically release notes. There's a lot of documentation in here. There's the keyboard I was mentioning, the 9832-46. So they call that out. Let's see here, logging control. Did that say FTAM? FTAM? I need to go back into that. So back in this era and a little before this era, TCP/IP wasn't necessarily the king of the hill and the winner of the protocol wars. So one of the protocols, there's the OSI model, like the 7-layer, 4-layer model. However, there were also OSI, the protocol, things like CLNS, connectionless network service. And that FTAM that we saw, I think that's OSI's answer to FTP. So that's interesting. I'll have to dig some more on that. This looks like some X errata and notes. Got some information about VI, specifically using CANA server to do Japanese input. Optical jukebox with 60 discs. Good heavens. This seems very, very specific to include in here. And I'm wondering, since it's NEC we're talking about, if they made one of these. And, if that was a use case for this machine and this platform, and that's why it's in there. So of course we're not going to get out of this video without using the terminal at least once. And because of the age of the operating system, DF doesn't have the quality of life switches that I'm used to for human readable. So it looks like M is probably the best I'm going to do to get it in megabytes. As I said, I enabled XNTPD. And that offset's much higher than I would hope it would be, but it does work. And the network works, all the way out to the internet. Trace route to my primary personal server. And because of the age of the machine, I could dig and confirm it, but I'm pretty sure that this trace route is doing the old school UDP probes as opposed to more modern, Windows does ICMP probes, or you can do -I, and Linux nowadays to do ICMP probes. And that's really about it for the desktop. We will shut it down. And thank you for watching.